It's the season of love. And if you're watching this on Valentine's Day, happy Valentine's Day. So in honor of Valentine's Day, I wanted to do a video all about relationships and astrology, all right? More specifically, Synastry, which is the astrology of relationships. So typically, most people want to know whether they're compatible with someone or not. And typically, they usually do it via sun sign. Like, I'm a Virgo, they're a Sagittarius, are we compatible? However, when it comes to relationships and astrology, it's a lot deeper than that. So today we're gonna be talking a little bit about Synastry, but most importantly, the best aspects in Synastry to determine whether you and your partner are going to make it. So stick around, you definitely don't wanna miss this. Hello, my loves. As always, I hope that this video finds you well and in excellent spirits. If this is our first time meeting, welcome. My name is Mel. I'm a professional astrologer and I'm the founder of Divine Feminine Works, where I help people unlock their divinity and discover their magic. And as always, if you are returning, welcome back. So today's video is all about love, specifically love and astrology. Now, like I mentioned in the intro, we're going to be discussing something called Synastry, which is the astrology of relationships. So even though this video is dedicated to romantic relationships, right, in honor of Valentine's Day, Synastry can be used to examine any relationships. Basically, the essence of Synastry is that you take two people's natal charts and you examine how they relate to each other. So those relationships could be familial, they could be friendship, they could be parent-child, they could even be co-worker, boss-employee. All you gotta do is take two natal charts and examine them as they relate to each other. That is what is known as Synastry. But like I said, today we're examining romantic relationships. And so when you take two people's natal charts, you have to see a bunch of different things. You can see a bunch of different things. Number one, you can see where one person's planets fall into another person's chart. You can also examine how one person's planets interact and interplay with another person's planets. And in doing so, that's how you would determine the type of relationship that these people will have. So a lot of people think, okay, if I'm a Virgo sun, they're a Sagittarius sun, are we compatible? And like I said before, it goes a lot deeper than that. And even in Synastry, it's not so much about are we compatible or not. It's more so about the type of relationship you will have. It'll show you the strengths of the relationship, the weaknesses, what you may need to work on, perhaps obstacles that stand in your way. It gives you a total and holistic picture of the relationship between two people. So without further ado, let's get into the best aspects in Synastry when talking about romantic relationships. All right, let's get into it. All right, so if you know me and if you're not a stranger to this channel, you'll know that I always start with basics. So let's cover some ground rules when it comes to Synastry so that we have a better understanding of what we're actually looking at. So like I said, Synastry is when you compare two people's natal charts. So it's like how one person is and how another person is and what kind of relationship they share based on their natal astrology. So of course, you kind of have to know yourself before you can start knowing and understanding your relationship. So you will definitely want to take a good look at your own natal chart, not only to figure out who you are, but to figure out your relationship style and what you perhaps look for and need in relationships. Now, if you want to know all about that, I did an entire video on it. This is it right here. Link will be in the description box below. You can check it out. But suffice it to say, you want to know what your communication style is like, what your emotional style is like, and what you look for in a partner. That will help you determine how this person relates to you romantically. Okay, that's number one. Number two, you also want to figure out your capacity in relationships. Now, relationships are not just lovey-dovey. A lot goes into relationships, especially communication. So you want to figure out what your communication style is and sort of how you show up in relationships generally, okay? And again, you're going to want to look at your own natal chart, and perhaps the other person is going to want to examine their natal chart in order to figure out what their relationship style and their capacity to relate to to people is. If you're someone who's more introverted and reclusive, right? You may not want someone who's flashy out there and it's all about a dog and pony show, right? Your own natal chart will show you your capacity to relate to other people. And when you understand what that is in your chart and the other person can understand what it is in their chart, then you can put the two charts together and figure out how you two can relate to each other. Okay. Now, also in terms of basics, planets like the moon and Venus are obviously going to be very important. The moon is our emotions. Venus is love and relationships. Where those sit in your chart in relationship to your partner is like a no-brainer, right? But again, synastry goes a lot deeper than that, planetary wise. When we're talking about aspects, we're talking about how the planets relate to each other. So in terms of aspects, and if you want to know all about aspects, I also have a video on that. That's it right there. Link will be in the description box below, so check it out. Aspects such as trines, sextiles, and in certain instances, conjunctions are going to be more favorable. When you have favorable aspects between two natal charts, it denotes a lot more harmony, a lot more positivity. You're not going to find a lot of tension or frustration or being on opposite ends of the spectrum. Trines, sextiles, and certain situations, conjunctions are going to be the aspects you're going to want to look for between two natal charts to denote whether a relationship is a lot more positive or maybe not so much, okay? Also, in terms of basics, one of the surprising things that you may not realize is that Saturn plays a very important role in relationships. Now, Saturn is known as a malefic planet. It talks about obstacles, challenges, delays, and stuff like that. However, when we're talking about relationships, aspects between Saturn and personal planets will show you where your relationship has longevity. And if you're talking about successful romantic relationships, longevity is definitely going to be a thing. So you're going to want to pay attention to where Saturn is in your chart as it relates to your partner's chart. And that will let you know the longevity of the relationship. All right. Now, this list of basics is by no means exhaustive. There are a lot of other things that go into it, but for the sake of this video, we're keeping it short, sweet, and to the point. Those are the basics that you need to know going into synastry. All right. So now let's get into my top 7 aspects in synastry that you'll want to look for if you want to have a successful romantic relationship. All right. Now, this list is also by no means exhaustive. It doesn't mean that if you don't have any of these aspects that you won't have a successful relationship. These just happen to be the aspects that when they show up tend to denote a successful romantic relationship. All right. And these are in no particular order. All right. So first up, we have the sun conjunct the moon. So one person's sun is conjunct the other person's moon. Now the sun and the moon together sort of make us whole. The sun is our outward expression and our personality. The moon is our inward expression and our emotions, right? When you put those two together, it's not that you have a whole person, but you sort of have someone who vibes with you on an individualistic sort of level. It's like my personality and your emotions go together and vice versa. So typically when you see sun conjunct moon in a synastry reading, that denotes a relationship that seems kind of whole. It seems holistic. It's like you get me, I get you. And from there, we can build a successful relationship. Number 2, moon conjunct Venus. So one person's moon conjunct another person's Venus. So this kind of synastry, this synastry aspect would really denote an emotional relationship. The moon denotes our emotions. Venus is love and relationships. So if you have this synastry aspect between you and your partner, needless to say, you probably have a very emotional, a very loving, a relationship that has a lot of emotional energy to it. So there could be a lot of love here. There could just be sensitivity and emotion, but on an emotional level, you and your partner pretty much get each other or fulfill each other's emotional needs. All right. So this is a really great aspect to see in successful romantic relationships. Number 3, any personal planets conjunct the descendants. So I'm pretty sure that you're familiar with the ascendant, right? It's your first house. It has a lot to do with your personality and your outlook on life and how people see you. Exactly opposite the ascendant is the descendant, and it's in your 7th house. The descendant represents others. It represents relationships. And so if one person's personal planets, like the sun, the moon, Venus, Mercury, Mars, if it is conjunct the other person's descendant, it means that the person with the personal planets probably contains or has the characteristics that the person with the descendant is looking for in relationships. For example, let's say person A has a descendant in Scorpio and person B has Venus in Scorpio conjunct person A's descendant. That means that the person who has the descendant in Scorpio is likely looking for someone who is substantive, deep, emotional. Their love runs deep. And person B with Venus in Scorpio, conjunct person A's ascendant, has that. So needless to say, one person's personal planets conjunct another person's descendant would mean that whatever qualities that person with the descendant is looking for in relationships, the other person likely has. So it can make for a fulfilling relationship. It can make for a relationship where one person's criteria is met by the other. Number 4, supportive Mercury aspects to personal planets. So Mercury is really important when we're talking about relationships because Mercury has a lot to do with communication. And if one person's Mercury is trine, conjunct, or sextile to the other person's personal planets, which would be Sun, Moon, Venus, Mercury, even Mars, it would mean that communication is positive, right? It would mean that you have a relationship where communication runs smoothly, or you at least have someone who communicates in the way that's comfortable to you, or perhaps tells you what you want to hear, okay? Either way, Mercury trine, sextile, or conjunct the other person's personal planets makes for a harmoniously communicative relationship, which is a very important foundational aspect to any successful romantic relationship. Number 5, planets in the other person's 5th, 7th, or 11th houses. So like I said before, synastry is about examining two people's natal charts. You kind of superimpose one on the other. So when you do so, you'll notice that some of your planets will fall in the other person's house, right? Now, when we're talking about romantic relationships, we want to focus on the 5th house, which has to do with romance, the 7th house, which has to do with commitment, and to a certain extent, the 11th house, which has to do with friendship. So if you find that your personal planets fall in your partner's 5th house, 7th house, or 11th house, that's a good indication that you are going to have at least the type of relationship that has to do with romance or commitment. Now, with the 11th house and friendship is actually a really important foundation when it comes to relationships. So even though you may have personal planets that fall in the other person's 11th house or vice versa, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're relegated to the friend zone. It may mean that you start out as friends, or your love life or your romantic life hinges on the type of friendship relationship that you have with that person. So when examining synastry charts between two people, if you find that you have personal planets in the 5th, the 7th, or the 11th house, that can be a good starting point when it comes to a successful romantic relationship. Number 6, vertex aspects. So I don't necessarily hear too many other astrologers talking about this. For me, when I examine synastry charts, the vertex is really important. Now, I'm not going to totally go into what that is, but suffice it to say, the vertex is a point of fate. And typically when you're looking at synastry charts, if you find that two people have positive aspects between the vertex and a personal planet, it kind of denotes the fact that this relationship is fated. Now, the longevity of the relationship is something entirely different, right? Now, and like I said before, it has a lot to do with Saturn. However, if you have your vertex trine the other person's Venus or moon, it definitely denotes that you two were fated to meet in a perhaps romantic sort of way. Now, the vertex can also be trine or sextile to Mercury or Mars or the Sun or any of those other personal planets. But suffice it to say, when we're talking about the vertex in synastry, we're talking about fated meetings. It has a little bit of a soulmate, maybe even a twin flame kind of connotation to it. But either way, it's like you two were meant to meet. You were meant to interact with this person in some way, shape, or form. And that can be the catalyst for a successful romantic relationship. And last but certainly not least, and this one happens to be my favorite, it would be personal planets conjunct the North Node. So let's say you have your Sun conjunct your partner's North Node, your Venus conjunct your partner's North Node. This also has a very fated and soul-matey kind of energy to it. So the North Node is who we're becoming. It's our North Star. It's where we're headed in this life. And so if you have personal planets that are conjunct your partner's North Node, you're definitely meant to be in each other's lives. Now, the longevity and the color and temperature of your relationship really depends on other factors within your natal charts. However, if you have personal planets conjunct your partner's North Node or vice versa, y'all are meant to be in some way, shape, or form. So it has this destined, soulmatey kind of feel and energy to it. Now, that could be perhaps in a karmic way because you guys have lessons to learn from each other, or you're literally meant to travel through life together at this point in time. But it's definitely a beautiful aspect that is probably a very strong foundational indicator of a successful romantic relationship. All right, my loves. So that concludes this video on the best synastry aspects for romantic relationships. Understand that this list is by no means exhaustive. There are so many other aspects in synastry that can denote a successful romantic relationship. So many other things to look at with two natal charts that can tell you whether your relationship is gonna make it or not, all right? And if you want to know more about your particular relationship, then consider ordering a synastry report from me, all right? Where I look at you and your partner's natal chart, read it for filth, and tell you the color, the temperature, and all of the good stuff regarding your relationship. Link will be in the description box below. All right, my loves, thank you so much. Happy Valentine's Day. I wish you guys love, abundance, and the most successful romantic relationships that you could possibly desire. All right, thanks so much for tuning in, and I will see you in my next video. Take care.